So here we are about to embark on the third of the three lessons I intend for this week, where we're looking at managers and what they're like as people, and consequently how they get the job done. Again, I'm going to share a screen with you, and you can follow along with this presentation while I talk over it. First thing to think about is that here in part three, I want you to think about how the information we've addressed in parts 1 and 2 affect you. And we're studying the principles of management, but ultimately, in a course where you could potentially major in the subject, we have to say, are you wanting to be a manager? Is it in your destiny? Is it a terminal value of yours? Because you must do some self-reflection and ponder whether you have what it takes in order to be a good manager. We don't want more bad managers. The world has enough of those, and heaven knows the country has enough of it. So would you be a good manager? Do you have what it takes? And have you an idea, have you formed at this early stage of your life an idea of your instrumental values, the characteristics of the pathway, the footsteps that you will leave on your path to your destination value, your termination or your terminal value? And this will require in part that you start to form an idea, and it's better to do it sooner rather than later, of your competencies, and specifically your management competencies, because sometimes being a boss is something which happens almost accidentally. I came across a case history of a young man who, Lani Mzila, is someone who speaks very, very proudly of his childhood and growing up with a grandfather who had a farm in Ilembe, just up the road from us. And this is why I selected the case. He's based now in Johannesburg. But the point is, as he points out here, as he says, the lifestyle and mindset of hard work and dedication and adhering to routines filters into the discipline you need for farming, and it teaches you a significant amount of patience. I reproduce from the case, and you can write to me and ask me for access. And if I get that sort of request, I'll certainly make it available to you. He's a Wits student, a graduate, and he would have studied a business finance degree. So his majors would have been in investments and corporate finance. And you'd expect him to be wearing a suit, driving a BMW, and working somewhere in Sandton or Rosebank or Houghton, or some sort of financial investments firm. But he says farming has always been in the family. He talks about his parents, because remember, he works with his brother. Our grandparents have a small farm about an hour outside Pietermaritzburg, and his parents were also farmers, came from a farming community. Cherishing his roots, wrote the journalist at the time, Mzila, and his older brother, Nkululeko, established Nason Foods, a vegetable farm located in Meyerton, Johannesburg. Now, what that means is that they serve as part of the food supply chain to Igoli. And we're going to have to address this term supply chain, I think, again. I have another story for you. And this is not a Wits graduate. This is one of our own. She graduated in 2016 in animal and poultry science on the Pietermaritzburg campus. And the case history here tells us that she was accepted as an intern, as we hope all of you, and as I intend all of you should aspire to. She sought her workplace experience and ended up working in Howick for Ren Stubbs, Mr. Ren Stubbs. And his claim was that she's passionate and committed and rose to the challenges that he gave her. So she spent 2 years on Mr. Stubbs' farm, and then traveled to Tasmania, which is an Australian island, basically. And she, when the story was written about 3 years ago now, she said that 2 years ago, she wanted to start her own farm. Whether she has or not, I don't know. But I have to start asking questions here when someone says they want to start their own farm. And the big question I ask, the overarching question is, will she actually manage it that? Because the supply chain for dairy farming is a very, very complex one. And I find more stories of dairy farms closing down in this country, as I've mentioned in the lectures we tried to have before they were disrupted last week and the week before. You have certain inputs um, as we establish here, all right, and those inputs are then processed by the dairy farmer who seeks to convert those inputs into products to sell to milk buyers. Having found the buyers, you process the milk product. Now, it is the case that the industry is one beset with difficulty, because many of the small farmers, even though they might try to act cooperatively, the point is this: if you have 100 head of cattle and you're running a dairy herd, and 100 head of cattle is a small dairy herd, if you're running a small dairy herd and generating consequently a small volume of milk, there are very few transporters who want to take a 30,000 liter tanker to your farm when you can put perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 liters of milk into that vehicle, because it's not worth their while. It becomes too expensive to run a vehicle, which could be, first of all, the insurance premiums of the vehicle are expensive to start off with. The repair costs are expensive, and small dairy farms are expensive to reach and to travel back from if you have to go to a number of them, because they're not conveniently set out in a row. So selling your milk as a small dairy farmer becomes a very, very difficult thing to do. And if we assess that in some sort of detail, then we have to ask whether she'll have the required competence. And if her internships have operated as we would like an internship to operate, then we can presume that perhaps she does have the required competence. I don't know if she'll have the requisite funds, though, because it's an expensive business, because you're buying so much equipment to process the inputs that you have, that she might just never be able to get a farm off the ground if she doesn't have financial backing. She could, of course, turn to lenders, which is why I say, does she have a line of credit, and will she be able to manage a line of credit? Will people lend her money? Will she represent a good investment for anyone? The equipment that she has supplied, she's going to have to manage those people, and they're going to see a young woman. They're not going to see a mature businessman. They might, unfortunately, take advantage of that and negotiate in bad faith with her. It should be very unfortunate, but practically that's what we see. Feedstock, certainly in this country, while we rely on pasture in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Free State, you can't rely on pasture, so you rely on buying feed stock into your dairy farm, which makes it an expensive business. It'll cost in excess of 100 Rand every day to feed a cow. There would be biosecurity. In other words, you'd have to keep this entire process one which is scrupulously clean. You couldn't entertain any notion of disease. You couldn't entertain any notion of contaminated milk product, because no one's going to buy your milk product when it's been contaminated once. Cold chain, keeping the milk product cold after you've chilled it on your farm, is an essential one. You're going to be spending money on veterinary supplies. Can that be managed? Can customers be managed? Because customers tend to be big. To sell milk to Clover Dairies means that they are going to buy hundreds of thousands of liters of milk every morning and every afternoon, and they don't have time to waste running after one small operator with perhaps 5,000 liters of milk maximum. So how does one manage Clover, who's your customer? The means of distribution, the transport suppliers. The transport suppliers defend their actions, but the transport suppliers have demonstrated that they've caused a number of people to exit the industry, because if you haven't got a big tanker arriving on your farm, you can't actually sell your milk product. You'll have to throw it away. Competition. How do you manage competition? Remember, the big corporate farms, organized agriculture, has deep pockets. They have the capacity to fund um, discounts, if you like, to their customers. The places like Clover, and Clover would therefore ensure that small farmers are done out of business. I'm not saying that's been the case. I'm simply saying that it's the kind of stuff which happens in business. And of course, there's still a staff that she has to worry about. And I'm beginning to question, I really begin to question whether in this country, someone like Kireshni is able to manage the staff that she would have on a typical South African farm, because I don't think she'd, in a toxic masculine culture, is going to find her job too easy. And then, of course, there's just the general administration of her business, and I don't know if she's going to do that. So let's just put you in her shoes. Would you be able to develop a business plan and raise capital? Would you be able to attend to all of the component parts of running a business? Could you, in fact, be a manager? And of what sort of business could you be a manager? Whether it's a dairy farm, or whether it's a banana plantation, or whether it's an accommodation establishment on the North Coast. You might be aspiring to be a cultural and heritage tourism major. And if you wanted to run your own tourism business, then would you be able to do that? What is the business? What is the nature of the business? What is the type of the business that you think you might end up managing one day? And would you believe that in a few years' time you'll have developed all of the appropriate competencies? Or will you have to work for someone else in order to develop experience of what happens in practice? And then finally, do you have what it takes? That's you. Do you have what it takes? That tug of war between employees and their managers, give rise to the day-to-day difficulties of being a manager. It isn't straightforward to take dynamic beings and to have them work as one, and very often managers get it wrong. But the manager is the key person in that final bullet point. The manager is the key person. The manager can be a good manager, or they can be a bad manager, which is why I'm going to point out to you that bad managers, while they might want to change, while we might put them on training courses, don't necessarily become better managers. It's wonderful that we have companies that are prepared to spend money on developing managers, but it's awful news that we achieve no lasting change. So the kind of survey results that I've been able to find for you demonstrate that bad managers have particular qualities, and those are identified for you there. The first one is a really critical one. Bad managers don't communicate clear expectations. In other words, they leave you guessing, and that's not good for business. The very last one at the bottom right-hand corner, they are easily threatened. And look at number 14, they don't recognize good work and efforts. So those things there, when that happens in an organization, when managers betray trust, those are things which are going to put an organization on the back foot. Good managers, on the other hand, demonstrate different qualities. They have the requisite organizational citizenship behavior, as you see it there. They work hard for the organization. They look at number 6, they make good decisions, and they are passionate about what they do. Very, very nice. They have a good grasp of what the whole business is about, and they see it holistically. They care about their employees and their employees' development, and they are calm, they don't get flustered, and they are flexible and adaptable. That's a good manager. And clearly you'll pause these slides so that you can dwell on these exercises, and you might look up the original studies yourself, but it gives you over here some sort of idea as to what we're addressing. And that's kind of what I need for you, is to to develop this powerful idea as to how things work and why they work like that. So, good managers, very simply, have got satisfied, committed people working for them. And when your staff are engaged, you just get more done. So pause the video at your leisure to look at that in more detail. And then please navigate to the reading I've put up on the Moodle page for you, because I'd like you to read Linda Hill's article on becoming a boss. The point is that we want you to demonstrate qualities of a good manager, not a bad manager. Again, pause this slide in the presentation at your leisure to look at in more detail. And remember that there are particular things I need for you to demonstrate when you walk into your test on the, what is it, the 3rd week in April. And I've reproduced for you those learning points. That's what you need to be able to do. And I see no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it. So until I see you in another lesson, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this one.